I had a mentor, Chris. I'll never forget when he told me this, but it was, if you live for their praise, you will die by their criticism.
Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we welcome Adam Christing. Adam is an expert on helping people connect through humor. He's emceed more than 1,000 events and worked with some of the world's most respected leaders and organizations. Adam is the author of The Laughter Factor, where he breaks down how humor builds trust, lowers defenses, and creates meaningful connection through what he calls the 5 laugh languages. Join us as Adam shares why intentionality matters more than spontaneity, and why humor, when used well, becomes a powerful display of servant leadership.
Adam, thank you for joining the Servant Leadership Podcast.
Chris, I'm happy to be on. You may not know this, but you're one of my favorite humans, so I'm excited to have a conversation with you about this.
That's good. I've seen you talk so many times, and I know you say that to everybody, so thank you.
No.
At least the last 20 interviews you've done.
No, I do want to tell you, it's rare to meet someone who is so great at what they do, so skilled, but also has these leadership abilities and a heart to serve other people. So I wish I was interviewing you.
Well, that is very kind. We've had the privilege over the years to get to know each other a little bit and spend some time together. The first time I saw you, you were up on stage doing, we'll say, you were emceeing a big event for an organization. And I thought in my head, how does somebody get into the entertainment industry like this guy? You know, not knowing you or your background at that point. Share with our audience kind of what you have done and what you do today.
Yes, I have to tell you, I've been doing this about 4 decades, and my mom, who's 88 and probably the funniest person I know, she asked me recently, like, do you think you're going to get a real job? So far, so good. But yeah, I never sat down as a kid and thought, I want to be a master of ceremonies when I grow up. But what happened is, because I was the class clown, like in 8th grade in high school, because I grew up learning to do magic tricks in Los Angeles. There's this great club called the Magic Castle, and I grew up hanging out there. I kept getting asked to host events like, hey, would you host this talent show? Would you host this conference at the church? Would you host this award show for our company? And since that time, I don't even know the number. It's well over 1,000 events that I have emceed. And then part of the journey, Chris, that's been fun and exciting is years ago, we started an entertainment company called simply Clean Comedians. And the motto is, it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny. So we book funny entertainers, speakers, MCs, magicians, you name it, who get big laughs without getting dirty or offending your audience.
I feel like these days that is so important and always has been. I remember my mom always looking up clean comedians. Then we would just watch comedians on TV. But the key was that they were clean. And it brings the whole family in then, right? Even kids at a young age. I'm curious, you've been able to host a lot of big events for a lot of major companies. On this podcast, we talk a ton about servant leadership. What are some things you've learned from a leadership standpoint, being able to work with so many other great leaders?
Yeah, I've been so privileged, Chris, to not only hear the great speaking, New York Times bestselling authors and CEOs and whatnot, but to also see the way people lead people. An event is more than just some speakers on stage. You're making a statement to your people. So, for example, next week I'll be with a number of leaders in the health and wellness industry. And to see they've been working on this for months, to see the preparation and the intentionality of saying, what is the messaging we want to get across? And so one of the things I've learned goes back to another great comedian, maybe America's most important humorist. Mark Twain said, it takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. And so when we think of comedians, we think, oh, they're just so fast, they're quick on their feet. But a great comedian, just like a great leader, knows where she or he wants to take people. And things can look and feel very spontaneous, but it's about being strategic. So when it comes to being a servant leader, people, the first thing they would say, hey, it's an attitude. And it really is, of course. But I think it's also being intentional and saying the outcome that we're seeking here is that people feel served and they feel empowered. And so the lesson I draw from other comedians is like the late great Robin Williams, he would carry this giant notebook with him that was full of gags and jokes and stories and quotes. And from what I understand, I did not know Robin personally, but I have friends who did know him, is he would go over it before he'd go on stage. So when his show started, it just felt electric and spontaneous and crazy, but it was what he was putting into his head. So one of the big lessons I've learned from leaders, whether they're corporate leaders, nonprofit, or whether they're leading comedians, is it can look spontaneous, but it takes a lot of, to use that word again, intentionality to say, this is the outcome that I want to create. So, for example, let's say you booked me for the Chris convention and there's going to be 500 people. First thing I'd ask you is, what's the feeling? What are the takeaways we want your attendees to have when they leave? And then to reverse engineer that.
Mm. Wow. It's interesting. You read rooms for a living, right? And you're talking about
Yeah.
this, and comedians have to be able to read the room. It's interesting in one-on-one conversations. I feel like it's sometimes really easy to read people, but reading a room is a whole nother skill set. And I'm curious, and I really wanted to ask you this. When you're thinking through, you always hear people talk about one of the key skills to learning and growing is listening. A comedian has to listen, but they're always thinking of the next response, right? And probably more so than other people. How do you balance that steering the conversation like you're talking about and getting the audience to where they go to while also truly listening to what people are saying versus just listening to respond?
I love this question, Chris. In fact, I don't know that I've been asked this. I think the pressure for a comedian or a speaker or leader is to say to yourself, I have to be funny, I have to be quick. And you really don't. I think listening, if you give it that extra beat. So what I would do, like let's say I'm emceeing an event and I'm sitting in the front row and the speaker is wrapping up and I know she's about to end. Well, if she ends on a emotional heavy note, I don't want to go up there and be Mr. Funny Man. If she's boring the audience, I might need to do some kind of an energy booster. So more than reading the room is I want to be like a thermometer of the feeling of the room. It's like I would say to people, yeah, reading the room is great, but it almost sounds like I'm reading a map. No, I am feeling the energy and I want to accept it, receive it, but then take it to another direction. So the challenge when you're doing stand-up comedy is you're expected to be funny. But what I've noticed is the audience is not necessarily expecting you to be funny every moment. What they love is what I call ha-thenticity. So you're sitting with a moment, like if I get heckled, I used to, as a younger comedian, I used to love to be heckled. I still actually enjoy it because if you think about it, the comedian has the microphone and has the control. The other person's probably had too much to drink, and the audience is not really rooting for the heckler. So somebody would heckle me, hey, you're not funny or whatever, and I might just instantly go, hey, this is my job. I wouldn't go to your job and unplug the Slurpee machine, right? So that's called a canned, stock reaction. But if I sat with it now as a more, veteran pro, and I really find out, okay, who's this person with? What's happening? Maybe there's a mental challenge this person has. So I want to take that extra beat to really listen. And this comes true in our marriages, parenting, relationships with customers. Is it's tempting to listen just long enough to get your point in, or your pitch, or your joke, or whatever it is. But I just tell people what my grandmother, who was Irish, would say. God gave you two ears and one mouth. And so try to listen twice as long, twice as hard as getting ready to speak.
Wow. Well, I think it's tips like that or wisdom like that that might have led into the laughter factor, right? So, just for reference for those that are listening, you came out with a book called The Laughter Factor. Uh, I joke, and you talk about this in the book a little bit, but it's like you took Gary Chapman's 5 love languages, not really, but turned them into 5 laugh languages. And I thought that that was so brilliant, and it just immediately like helped somebody understand what the book would be about and how to relate to people. I'm curious. I do want to talk through what they are, but before we get into that, why do you feel like humor helps lower some of the defenses that people are feeling, whether it be in a one-on-one thing, whether it be in a like a corporate setting or a group event? Why does humor actually lower defenses?
I am fascinated by that, and that's part of why I wrote the book. And as I was researching it, I knew that laughter helps us feel better. I mean, science is backing up what was said, I think, in the book of Proverbs, right? A merry heart does good like medicine. It's it's true. Scientifically, you feel better, your stress goes down, all kinds of great things. But what really surprised me as I was researching the book, Chris, is how it instantly builds a connection with other people. And I noticed this. We have a brand new grandson. Well, he's probably about 8 months old now, but he's not speaking quite yet. He's not riding a bike, but what's he doing? He's already laughing. And his mom, his dad, my son, when we see them bonding with our little grandson Bryson, it's like it's something that goes back to us being babies and being children. Even it's like I like to say, humor is a shortcut to trust. So it's very hard to be mad at someone that you're laughing with.
Mm.
And so whether you're talking about a personal relationship, a customer, a vendor, it's like if you can intentionally plan to laugh together, and this is why we're losing out so much by not meeting in person. Like if you and I were in person right now, I know there'd probably be, it's likely more laughter just because we're kind of feeling each other's energy right now through Zoom, through web, whatever, we can still connect. Like I can see you smiling and I can feel your energy. But I encourage people to get physically together. One of the first things I'll do, like one of the events where you saw me MC, chances are before the audience came in, I was there and had them move the chairs and the round tables closer to the stage because the closer we get, the better we feel together. But back to your question about why laughter's so magical, I honestly don't know. I think maybe it goes back to the word humor is the same root word as human. When we talk about our frailties, our failures, our foibles, whatever, we feel this bond. Like if I were to tell you about this great business success I had, you might go, "Hey, that's cool." But if I tell you about the time I totally flopped, we'll probably laugh together and you'll feel more connected to me.
Wow. What is as I think through the book, and I just think through laughter in general. Laughter is contagious, and smiles are contagious. And you
Yes.
talk a little bit about this. I've even noticed when one of my sons starts belly laughing, my wife and I will look at each other and start laughing. We don't even know what he's laughing about, but it's just like funny, and like seeing the joy on his face. You talk through the 5 laughter languages. Could you explain to our audience how you came up with them and maybe give a couple examples of them as well?
First, when you mentioned your son, I have to just tell you, I so agree. Laughter's contagious, and it helps us like each other just instantly. I've never shared this on a podcast before, but I remember being in high school, and there was this girl that I liked, and she laughed at everything I said. And I just thought, well, so she obviously likes me too, right? And long story short, I found out later, like she laughed at everything everybody said. So all these guys kept falling in like with her, and she was very popular. And so sometimes we make the mistake of thinking as leaders, our job is to be the funniest person in the room.
Mm.
It's really not. Sometimes it's appreciating the humor of other people. So when I unpack these 5 laugh languages or 5 humor tactics, I think it's just as important to discover your own as it is to, if you can, this is real servant leadership, but if I can discover, oh, Julie's laugh language is this, and Mike's laugh language is this, and Jose, that what makes him laugh is this. Then as a leader, I can kind of tap into what brings them joy.
Mm.
So in a nutshell, the 5 laugh languages, and I even have them on this handy dandy card, Chris, so that I don't forget. But the first one is surprise. And maybe this is the heart of all humor. Like you don't even need a joke. So for example, if you learned a simple magic trick, let's say, one time I was at this old famous magic shop in Hollywood, California, and a very boring, quiet man named Earl was showing a card trick. He didn't tell any jokes, but he was doing a card trick where I think the aces disappeared. And I heard that people like busting up. And I thought to myself, he's not a comedian. He's not doing jokes. It was because he was surprising them. And so when you surprise someone by what you say, how you dress, breaking a pattern, like if you asked to take everybody's lunch order and then brought them breakfast, well, they might be upset, but they might laugh a lot because you're breaking a pattern. So I call this delighting people with the power of the unexpected. The next laugh language is poke. And Chris, this is the trickiest one. Poke is really gently teasing other people and making fun at yourself. And obviously the reason this one is tricky is if you use humor in a sarcastic way, for example, which fits poke, you might make them laugh, but probably you're making them feel bad about themselves. And so I say in the book that your humor should be sharp enough to pop a balloon, but never to break a heart. And so the safe way to handle this second humor tactic of poke is poke fun at yourself. Oh my gosh, it's comedy gold. When you talk about your business failure, your dating mistakes, your parenting mess ups, it's funny. And as a leader, I know this is a big theme in your work of being a servant is your people are silently wanting to know what makes you tick. And when you use what I call Ha-thenticity and show them this side of yourself, you might think, oh, they're not going to respect me so much if they know I went through a bankruptcy or I went through a divorce or I got a DUI or whatever it is. And some of those things are not necessarily funny, but when you're transparent, your people go, oh, he's human. I can follow him, or she's real. I can approach her with some of my problems because I know she's been through them. So before I unpack the other 3, I don't want to make this a monologue. Any thoughts or?
No, that's good. I was going to ask you even after this, I was thinking jumping on here. I've heard a lot of people say that their love language is sarcasm, and then thinking about humor, sarcasm is a type of humor. And I literally was thinking, how does sarcasm fit in? And maybe the poke example is where it is, but sometimes sarcasm is just responsive. It's not poking at someone or at yourself. It's just a response. Did you think about that in terms of sarcasm specifically related to the other laughter habits or tactics?
Yeah. The 5 humor tactics are not complete in the sense that there's lots and lots of ways to make people laugh. So I work as a clean comedian, but I know if I were to use a curse word or some obscenity, I could instantly get a laugh. Why? Because I'm using the power of shocking or surprising, but I don't want to lead people that way. And it's the same with sarcasm. It's trickier there because sarcasm can work, but sarcasm is almost always belittling, right? And I think if you want to, instead of belittling people, if you want to be big them, make them feel bigger. And so I recommend being sarcastic or putting yourself down. And here's a tricky tip that I hope your listeners find helpful. You want self-diminishing humor, not self-defeating humor. So another way of saying this is self-effacing. So if I tell you, Chris, this is embarrassing, but I made a movie and I was the actor. I was one of the lead actors. I was the director. I was the main writer, and we raised the money. So I was in a movie. And when we got to the editing room, we discovered that my acting was so bad, I got cut out of my own film. and I became the narrator. So when I share a story like that, I'm poking fun at myself, but it's true.
Mm,
Whereas if I tell you a story where I'm the winner and I kept winning and winning, it's probably not going to be funny and people aren't going to relate to it. And
yeah.
this kind of leads me to the next of the 5 laugh languages. I call it in jokes. And this one might be my favorite. I think my go-to laugh language is surprise, but if I could only choose one to use in a group, it's in jokes. And this is where you notice, like right now, my assistant and I, for some reason, we stumbled upon the word mammal. And so instead of saying this person, this human, he, she, whatever, we've just been saying mammals lately. It's really not that funny, but to us, it's funny because it's become an inside joke. So if I'm on stage and some guy's wearing I don't know, a very loud golf shirt, and I know that he's a good sport about it, I might mention that 2 or 3 times
Mm,
over a 2-day conference. Like, we're gonna go out and get Jerry some new batteries for his shirt or something like that. That becomes an in joke. And again, you wanna be sensitive. My, philosophy on this, Chris, is if in doubt, leave it out. But most leaders can take some ribbing and some teasing, and so I highly recommend in jokes. The last 2 are wordplay and amplify. And wordplay is, you've probably noticed as a dad yourself, dad jokes are hot. So I can't believe it because when I was growing up, a dad joke could, get you kicked out of class, and it was like, "Oh, no, a bad pun." But wordplay, poems, rhymes, silly statements, there's some great comedians, like Mitch Hedberg and, Stephen Wright were kind of famous stand-ups who were great at wordplay.
mm.
Like Stephen Wright would say something like, "I put spot remover on my dog, now he's gone." So you've got a setup and a punch, but you've just got this funny word picture. The last one of the 5 is what I call amplify. And this one, some of your listeners are great storytellers, exaggerators. They heighten the pain. Like somebody might go to the grocery store and maybe they got delayed for 3 or 4 minutes in the checkout line, but when they come back from the lunch break and tell you, it sounds like they had this, attack on the, Amazon River, involved all kinds of things, and it's just because they exaggerate. So, you can tap into this laugh language by, being not just telling a story, for example, but, like, living it.
Mm.
You can tap into this by amplifying and exaggerating the pain, the details. Numbers are great. So one of the ways I recommend this in the book is using the word so. So instead of just saying, like, let's say you're based in Minnesota and people are joking about how cold it is, you could use the word so. It was so cold, and then other people are like, well, how cold was it? And it might be like, Starbucks was serving coffee on a stick or something. So it was so cold. So if you want to get into the amplify language, think of ways to exaggerate and magnify the numbers, the details, the personal pain. So those are the 5 humor tactics. And in the book, I give examples, I give jokes, but most importantly, I give you some humor homework where you can try these things out and see what fits your personality.
Wow. Well, one of the things that I think through as you're talking is so often people do use humor, but it's to tear others down or to build themselves up. When we think about servant leadership, it's about building up those around you. And one of the things I love about how you talk about humor is it's all about building everyone else up, right? It's true servant leadership. There's an example I once heard you share, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share it here too. And it's specifically related to your in jokes. And one time you were asked, I think, to roast some executives at a large company. And you got up and treated that situation in a way that I think was really interesting. Do you recall that? And could you share that with our audience?
Yeah, if it's the one I'm thinking of. I mean, I've been invited to do that kind of thing a few times. It's funny. It's funny, Chris, to get paid to do things you used to get in trouble for doing in school, you know? But yeah, the one in particular that you're probably referring to is KPMG, which is, you know, one of the top 4 or 5 accounting firms. They were honoring 11 retirees, and they wanted to roast them and toast them. And so they gave me an hour, basically 55 minutes. So I had 5 minutes to roast each person. And I probably spent at least 20 hours prepping this. So here was my secret. What is the unique thing about each of these people that is safe to make fun of? So it might be Julie is addicted to coffee. It might be that Tom is the worst golfer in the world, but he still loves it. And so I wanted to make sure from the company, okay, it's okay to go after each one of these, you know, like whoever. Bruce is a dapper dresser. And so I basically created 5 monologues or comedy routines, and each one worked because I didn't try to do everything, right? Like I didn't talk about this person's cooking and their golf game and this. It was like, what's the one thing? So as a leader, if you can think about what is it that really makes your receptionist laugh, then you can focus in on that. What is it that people love to tease me about? You can focus on that. So I hope that answers your question about that. That
Yeah.
was an unusual gig. We called them gigs.
Well, and one of the things that I think is so interesting is after that experience of being roasted, sometimes people could feel down on themselves or laugh because the room is laughing, but also feel like, oh, that was a little humiliating. And I think all those people walked away in that experience, walked away feeling celebrated. And that's one of the unique things that I think humor does too, is it can celebrate people's differences and celebrate who they are and who they were made to be, which is just interesting.
I love that observation. Yes, you know, I love the focus of your podcast, Chris. And when I think of some of my favorite servant leaders, I think of Abraham Lincoln, who was a master at the self-defeating, that's not the word I want to use, self-effacing humor. Like one time he was in a debate and somebody said, hey, you're two-faced. And he said, if I was, I certainly wouldn't be wearing this one. Right. So he was not a handsome man, apparently, for his time. And so he made fun of that. I think of Mother Teresa, who loved and helped so many millions of people and inspired others. And she said, a smile is the shortest distance between two people. Love that. I think of Jesus, and here's a big shocker for people, but there's a book called The Humor of Christ by Elton Trueblood. And he identifies, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's like 32 times where Jesus used humor. So he basically used all 5 of these humor tactics. He would exaggerate, so he would amplify. He would do in jokes, like when he talked about, why do you try to take a speck of dust out of your brother's eye when you have a log jutting out of your own eye?
Mm.
Well, he was using humor that we're not catching today, reading it or hearing it 19, 20 centuries later. But at that time, he's using language that was common to farmers and fishermen and woodworkers. And so to be intentional about humor as a servant leader, I think, is to actually say, my communication matters. I want to give it some thought. It's more than just before the meeting, Googling a quick joke, but do you want to be intentional about the way you make people feel? And leaders often think that their only job is casting a vision, but the way you make people feel about their future and about you and the relationships with others is so crucial for great leadership. We're in the experience economy, and today I think more than ever we're experiencing what you might call trust deficit, right? So if humor can help you instantly build trust, it's a resource that's worth cultivating.
Mm, that's so good. I love that. One of the things, and that makes me think of, you created a quiz to help people try to identify their laugh language and how they could maybe think about implementing humor into their everyday life. Can you talk about why you came up with the quiz, what it is, a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the wonderful man, Dr. Gary Chapman. His book, The Five Love Languages, I think it's sold, I can't remember, 20 million copies. It's just been a sensation. And so we gave our youngest son, James, who's a college student, a copy of the book. And we said, hey, buddy, read it. Let us know what is your love language. And so a few weeks later, James, tell us, what's your love language? And he said, Venmo. So that was fascinating. But the reason I came up with the quiz was not to model Gary Chapman, but in a way to have people realize, oh, there's different ways of being funny. Like you've probably heard people say, I love to laugh, but I'm just not funny. Well, it's true that you might not think you're funny, but because you're a human being, you are a humor being. So if your listeners go to this web page called thelaughterfactor.com, in 4 minutes, they can fill out this quiz, and it's kind of fun to do it. And it delivers to you your laugh language. And so you might discover, I was surprised. I came up with the quiz, and yet I was surprised at the result I got because I thought I would get the tactic of in-jokes. But what I gravitate most to is surprise. So I love sending people silly gifts in the mail. I love leaving crazy messages on their voicemail. If I'm doing comedy, I like to make a dove appear out of nowhere so it looks like magic, and then I fold it up and put it in my pocket. I'm surprising people all the time. So once you know what your laugh language is, and once you learn what your associates favorite style of humor is, it makes you a more powerful leader because you shouldn't feel, I mean, it's always a bit nervous doing humor, right? And we can talk about why that is, but it should be you. It's not you trying to be someone you're not. You don't have to be the funniest person in the room, but as a leader, you can be an orchestrator of fun.
Well, it's interesting because let's say people take the test and they start flexing their humor muscles, and they're not always going to, like, their humor will not always land, right? They're learning to read the rooms. They're learning their own humor for themselves. Have you ever bombed being the expert at this? And then at the same time, how do people flex that muscle and not get discouraged when things don't work?
Yes. When you asked if I've ever bombed, I feel like answering, you mean this week? I mean, it's so easy to bomb. I've bombed, I can't even remember, dozens and dozens of times. I've bombed at comedy clubs. I've bombed at churches. I've bombed at corporate settings. Now there's different levels of bombing. I've never been kicked off a stage. That did happen to a friend of mine, but there was one event I'll remember at a university where it was an older audience and my comedy was not working. And I thought, well, I'll become a motivational speaker. That was not working. I thought, well, I'll do some card tricks. That was not working. I thought, well, I'll do a little sermon. That's not working. And so, but by the end of that, trying all those things, like my time was up. So I was okay. But yes, I have bombed. And I think one thing to learn, and this is true, whether you're giving a speech or a sales presentation or whatever, is you are not responsible for the outcome.
Mm.
You are responsible for the preparation and for delivery. And there's an old saying in comedy, there's no such thing as a bad audience. I don't agree. There are bad audiences. There are drunk audiences. There are bored audiences. There are audiences for whatever reason, maybe there's a language barrier or all kinds of things. And so I had a mentor, Chris, I'll never forget the words, forget when he told me this, but it was, if you live for their praise, you will die by their criticism.
Mm.
So I have to be careful as a comedian because there have been times where I kill. That's what we call it. I destroyed, I killed. And I feel it's almost like I've never taken cocaine, but I can imagine it's like a high, like you are so high, like a euphoria when you hit a home run. And then I've had times when I've bombed. Like, I'll give you an example. One time I spoke to the Green Bay Packers and did a little chapel for them. And if they had won the game they were about to play that day, they would have gone to the Super Bowl. And they were up 16 points. with about 6 minutes to go against Seattle, and people were texting me, "You're the man. We love the Packers. Whatever you shared with them, awesome. You must have made them laugh. You must have motivated them." And then they say it's the second greatest meltdown in NFL history. The Packers lost that game in 6 minutes, and people were texting me, "You're a traitor. What did you say to them?" But what I realized is, like, I had no control over the outcome of the game. And so when I identified myself with the response was where this kind of fake pride and then false sense of failure came in. Your job as a leader is to communicate the message and do it in a way that serves others. And whether that's humor or whether that's painting a picture of where you're going, you are not responsible for the reaction. At the same time, I love this saying: the meaning of communication is the response you get. So if you are consistently bombing, Chris, we have a problem, right? And one more thing I'll say on this topic is you are going to feel nervous, whether you're giving a speech. They say people are more afraid of speaking in public than just about anything. I've read some stats that say people fear speaking in public more than they fear death,
Mm.
which is pretty wild. But when you feel that nervousness, I encourage my clients and friends to reframe it. Like, let's say some tragic thing happened, like a friend of yours was stuck under a car and there were no moments to spare. So you suddenly felt this adrenaline rush and you could lift the back end of the car up and they got away. Well, when you're feeling that kind of nervousness, it's actually a similar adrenaline rush to when you're able to lift a car or something.
Mm.
The point being, you're going to feel nerves, you're going to feel butterflies. What you want to do is get them to fly in formation. So
Mhm.
I have given more than 4,000 humor-based presentations in my career. And here's the crazy thing. I still get nervous every single time. And so now I get nervous if I don't get nervous because I know that's energy that I can channel to say, this matters. This is going to be great. I'm getting a kind of a super boost of adrenaline before I get on the microphone.
Wow. I mean, you've done it thousands of times and have a rhythm. For somebody that for the first time they're thinking, I didn't think I was funny. I just thought I laugh at a lot of things. What do you tell them to try?
Love that question. Try the same thing over and over again. And so let's say you have next Friday, you have an important 5-minute opening for an award show. The temptation would be to prep for the next week or whatever and try to come up with a joke and a great slide and then knock them dead. A better move would be to take that 5 minutes and try it out with your staff, with your family, at the church potluck, at a Rotary Club, so that when it really counts in the spotlight for that big moment, you've already done it 5 or 6 times
Mm.
and you're not making it up or you're not feeling like this isn't working being in your head. An audience can tell instantly if you're in your head or in your heart. And so another mistake I see people making that's similar to what we're talking about is they get it all on a card or a couple pieces of paper or a notebook, and you've just instantly killed the rapport with the audience. You want your head up, you want your eyes focused on your audience, and you want to feel what you're saying. So great speaking and great joke telling really is a transfer of conviction. It's not the content. The content's important. I've never had someone come up after a speech and say, on page 3 of your script, paragraph 4, you messed up. I've never had that. I have had people say, I loved your content, but what they were really getting at was it spoke to them.
Mm.
So what I encourage people to do, I know I'm getting a little bit more into speaking tips, is don't bring up more than like a 3x5 or a 4x6 card and just have talking points.
Mm.
Don't try to memorize an entire speech, but what are your top 3 to 6 talking points? Might be an acronym. So let's say I was interviewing you, Chris, on stage with hundreds of people. I might take your name, Chris, and make it an acronym so that I don't need to have notes on the stage. I want to be focused on you. So C might be, I want to hear about your childhood. H might be, how did you harness your abilities as a young man? I, tell me about some of the people who inspired you. And then the S would be, do you have some strategies that you'd recommend for other people?
Mm,
So now I know where I'm going, but I'm not locked into notes. And these are talking points rather than a kind of a wooden script.
mm. Well, that's so interesting, and that's awesome from a speaking standpoint. It makes me wonder too, if you're a leader sitting one on one with somebody, and you talk about this, how laughter and humor helps build trust. How should somebody then in a one on one setting do that?
It goes back to some of the things we were saying. I think power is always in the hands of the person asking questions. So, not that power can sound like almost a wrong thing to have, but let's say influence might be a better word.
Mm,
So, rather than going in knowing I want to say this and then I want them to say that, is asking questions. And so, on a one on one situation, I might ask a question that makes them laugh. So, I might say, hey, tell me about the first or worst job you ever had. And I guarantee you, by asking some questions like that, what was the first car you ever drove? And some questions that aren't going to lead to a comedy routine, but they're going to lead to like some warm feelings.
mm,
I think another thing to do in a one-on-one setting is, and you have to not be fake about this, but like as we're talking, I'm enjoying you and I feel you're enjoying me. And so sometimes that's hard because maybe this person's bringing me news I don't want to hear, but I'm always thinking, what can I enjoy about this other person? Because let's face it, Chris, we like to think we're thinkers first, but really we're linkers. We're linkers. We feel before we think.
mm,
So we make the mistake of thinking, I just got to get them information, but we're not logic based mammals, to use that fun word again. We are emotional, we are spiritual, we are social. And so I want to bond with people before I try to get into too much content.
mm. Wow, this is so good. I'm excited for people to check out the quiz. So we're going to make sure to link to the quiz where people can go check that out. Before we finish, I want to hit you with 10 rapid fire questions
Whoa.
where you just say the first thing that comes to mind, and we'll see if there's any wrong answers.
You're going to tell me if there's some wrong ones?
Maybe. Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
Has to be Jesus.
Mm. 5 words that most describe you.
Fun, reader, dad, writer, explorer.
Mm, those are good. Favorite book or author?
This is going to sound crazy, Chris. The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. He won the Pulitzer Prize, which was awarded to him after his death. But I think that book, it's one of the few books I've read twice. If you can come to grips with the fact that you're mortal, you suddenly realize you don't have to take everything so seriously.
Wow. I'll check that one out.
Eternity matters more than this afternoon.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I will check that out.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite food?
Oh, taquitos.
I like
If
that.
you can ever get to Olvera Street in downtown Los Angeles, maybe the first store area in California, get their taquitos. Oh my gosh.
I thought you were going to say Takis, like the chip bag.
Those are good too.
Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Chess. I am hooked on internet chess. I even won a tournament once. So I play 3 minutes. I get 3 minutes, you get 3 minutes. So it's over quick, but it's just a great brain stimulant.
Wow.
By the way, am I messing up your game right now because
No.
I'm giving you long answers to short questions?
No, this is good. This is where we find out if you get it right or wrong.
Okay.
What's a surprising fact about you?
A surprising fact about me is that I struggle with depression.
Mm.
I think people would be surprised to realize that comedians often need the medicine that they give other people. And so maybe you know someone who's a great home builder, but their home is in need of repair, or a doctor who smokes, or a pastor who's needs to spend more time with his children. And so as a comedian, I have to remind myself, I know how to give it to other people. I could go into a group with with one of these, a handheld microphone, and I could start engaging and getting them laughing. But I need to receive what I give other people. So
Wow.
that's the answer to that one.
Wow, that's good. I do feel like sometimes comedy can mask that, and
Mhm.
that's where it's like you have to know yourself and where you're at in that process. Where's your favorite place you've been?
Mm. I've been to 49 of the 50 states.
Wow.
2 weeks ago, I was in Bali, Indonesia, which was incredible. But I would have to say it may not be the favorite, but it would be Durango, Colorado.
Okay.
Have you been there?
No, never heard of it.
Oh, it it has a river that runs through the town. It feels like you're back in the Wild West, and yet I don't even know. There's probably 80,000 people there or something. There's a train, a narrow gauge mine train that runs through the town, and so it's where I got into magic tricks because I had an uncle when I was a kid. I would visit Durango and see my grandparents. My uncle would pull coins out of my ears and do magical things. So it's been years since I was back. I
Wow.
hope that this year I make it back to Durango, Colorado.
Wow, that's so special. Is there anywhere in the world that you want to go that you haven't been?
I'm embarrassed to tell you, I've been to Ireland, many parts of Europe. I've never been to London,
Wow.
um, or Scotland. So that's on the sweet spot of places I'd like to go.
I have to interject in the 10 questions. What's the 50th state? I'm on my seat wondering what state haven't you been to?
It's crazy because I've done Maine. When I say done it, as an entertainer, I've spoken or entertained or emceed. Alaska is the one is I've done, but I think I'm contradicting myself. Maine is the one I haven't been to.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's pretty out there. All
So
right.
if you can get me booked into like a lobster business festival or something,
You'd be set. What's
yeah.
the best advice you've ever received?
So I was at Biola University. I was a senior. I was nervous about, do I want to go full time into speaking and comedy? And I had a fantastic mentor, Dr. Todd Lewis, and I wanted to know what he thought. And I said, Dr. Lewis, do you think I could make it as a comedian, as a full time speaker? And he said, well, I think you could, but what's more important is whether you think you could.
Mm.
And that was a game changer for me, Chris, because it reminds me of one of my heroes, Dale Carnegie, who wrote a book that's even a bigger bestseller than Dr. Gary Chapman's. He wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he was asked, how do you sell so much? And Dale Carnegie said, because I'm sold. And so I think as leaders, we think that we need to sell and inspire, and that's important, other people. But the most important dialogue you'll ever have is with yourself as a leader.
Well,
What do you believe? What are your convictions? And so when Dr. Todd Lewis asked me that, I started thinking, well, yeah, I believe that I could make it as a full-time entertainer and speaker. And pretty much since that time, that's what I've been doing.
wow, that's great advice. All right, finally, on this podcast, we talk a ton about servant leadership. Why do you feel like it's important for people to learn about servant leadership, maybe even through the lens of humor?
Oh, I love that. I think servant leadership is another way of saying love.
Mm.
And we can complicate it and have techniques and things, but if you love someone, you show that. Love is more than a feeling, it's an action, right? So if I love my fellow comedians that my company books, if I love my right-hand person who's on the admin side, if I love my clients, it's more than just saying that. It's demonstrating that. And I love that verse in scripture where it says God demonstrated his love. So it doesn't just say that he loves us, but he demonstrated that love. So as a leader, you want to think, how am I demonstrating my service to others? And it is a commitment. And what's amazing though is it does affect people's feelings. Like, I believe that people will follow you through the trenches, through all kinds of trials and tribulations, if they know they're loved and cared for. But you can't fake that. It's a habit. It's kind of like courage is not a feeling, it's a habit. And the same is true with servant leadership.
Wow. That's so good. Well, Adam, thank you for being willing to share your wisdom on the podcast with our audience, and just for opening up through the book and helping us all find a little bit of humor in our lives.
Well, thank you. I feel like I got more out of it than you did, Chris, because you're very good as a podcaster, and you're one of the most caring people I've known in the business world. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. Very kind. Might have to cut that part out, but thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.